Good afternoon, guys. It's working. Bringing you a quick update on. We're going to be looking at a few cryptocurrencies, actually, guys. And I'm going to give, instead of doing our deep dive, typically, I'm going to give you a general overview of what's going on with a few currencies here in the market. If you missed my update yesterday, I would encourage you to look at it because I'm going to refer to a lot of things that I'm not going to go through in detail today, but a lot of things I referred to yesterday. Starting off with Bitcoin, we're looking at the 4-hour chart on Bitfinex, guys. And yesterday Bitcoin was consolidating right below 6750. I told you to expect it to either break above that zone decisively, or it was going to end up correcting possibly down to this 6540. It ended up falling down, correcting to this. Didn't quite make the 6540. I showed you guys yesterday this ascending support line here. It's acting as support now. It was acting as resistance here, and initially when it was created, it was acting as support in this wedge pattern back here. Extend that line out, we can see it's now acted as support 2 times on margin exchanges and 1 time on non-margin exchanges. This being the first time today. Price did end up breaking down. This little wick here was the first time on margin exchanges. That didn't show up on exchanges like Coinbase or Binance. It only showed up on margin exchanges like Bitfinex. But this obviously showed up on everybody's exchange. Sorry, guys, got distracted there with that message. Sorry about that. And anyway, it found support right at this ascending support line. Now, is that ascending support going to hold? Right now, guys, it's anybody's guess. If I pull out here and I look at our MACD, this is on the 4-hour, we could see that we've got, if I look at this point to this point, clearly price created a higher low. If I look at the same point on the histogram on the MACD, we've got a lower low, and that was clearly in an uptrend. So what do we have here, guys? We have that's a hidden bullish divergence. I'm telling you that this correction might be bottoming out. That's why you had this little uptick right here. Now, the fact that that did not show much follow through or much volume at all tells me that might be short-lived and that we might still have further to correct. If 6540, if this support 6540 does break down, I am expecting price to fall down to at least, as I told you yesterday, at least 6400. That's where there's a decent level of should be, I should say, a decent level of support. If we come back here and we look, we can see it acted as support right here, acted as resistance right here, support, resistance, support. So I would expect it to act as support again somewhere roughly around 6400-ish, somewhere thereabouts, 6380 to 6420. That is a general area what I expected to find support, but I do think there's a good chance it's possibly going to break down and touch this 6280. Now, if 6280 does break down, guys, and if it breaks down decisively, in other words, by more than just this a little wick, I do think we're going to come down and test 6100, and 6100 has to hold. If 6100 does break, guys, we're going to come back down. We're going to test new 2018 lows, and that'll be extremely clearly it's going to be obviously a bearish indication short term, but could be a very bearish indication for a long term. This market could take a major shift if that does happen. Now, we're nowhere near there yet. For now, if I look at this from an Elliott perspective, and as I told you guys in the past, I do not like to use Elliott in low volume markets because it just does not work very well, in my opinion. Now, I know some people differ with me on that, and each their own. Everybody's got to do their own thing. But if I do put my Elliott hat on here just quickly, and I kind of entertain the thought that this might be, what are we looking at? To me, this is possibly a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If that's the case, we're on wave 4 here. How can I count this wave 4? I'm looking at this as I'm not even acknowledging this long wick because it didn't show up on most of the exchanges, only on margin. So if I leave that out of the equation, I look at this as an A, B, possibly a C. Now, this C wave could absolutely come down and extend down into this area. That's a real possibility. It come down to 6400, or even 6280. That's a real possibility, guys. But for now, that's kind of what I'm looking at as an ABC, and if that is in fact the case, and if we have seen bottom, what can we expect going forward? Well, we can look at this, we pull our fib extension, and if that is the bottom, if I just target a 1-to-1, that brings us above this 7,000. And if we get above 7,000, guys, as I've told you in the past, this 6950, 7,000 range is incredibly important. I told you guys last time that is the golden pocket, and again, if you've missed my prior updates, go back and look at them. The golden pocket is between the 618 fib extension and the 65 fib extension. So if I go swing high, swing low, we can see that is that area right here, the 618 fib and the 65 fib. If we get north of that, it'll be the first time that price is retraced past that golden pocket in all of 2018, and in my opinion, might signal the start of a larger bull run. Until that happens, I'm not going to believe that, or I'm going to remain very skeptical of this. You know, not completely. I'm not saying this is dropping to all-time lows like some analysts are saying. I'm saying I'm skeptical and I'm watching price, and I'm not putting my eggs in one basket, guys. I'm being flexible and I'm letting the setup come to me. If you're a day trader, or if you want a dollar cost average in, that's completely on to you. Wouldn't be a bad idea to do. Have your stop losses tight, but personally, guys, I'm kind of hands off on this market. I don't see a good trade setup. If price does crash back down to 62.80, I might take a quick scalp trade, hoping for a nice little bounce here. If price breaks above 69.50, at that point, I'm going to start to get very bullish. I think it'll probably rise as soon as it gets above 7,000. We'll call that a good psychological number, because we can probably wick above 69.50 without a decisive break. But if we get a decisive break above 69.50, by decisive I mean if a 4-hour candle opens and closes above 69.50, not just opens, not just closes, but opens and closes, then I'm going to start to get very bullish. And I do think at that point there'll be a quick rise up to attest this prior high of 63, of 64, of 74.20. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap Bitcoin there. Moving on to EOS. Looking at EOS, we've got a very similar pattern here. EOS was getting squeezed inside what looked like a nice little wedge pattern here, a series of lower highs, higher lows, and it did just break down just like Bitcoin. In fact, the similarity to Bitcoin on this chart is almost laughable. But again, looks to me like we have the completion of a primary wave 1. I can get 5 little small subwaves within that, and we'd be looking at an A, a B, and back down for the C. Now, if that is in fact correct, and I pull my fib extension off this entire structure, what are we looking at? We can see that price came down to retrace just below the 382 fib. Normally, if this is a wave 1, a primary wave 1, and we're coming down for the primary wave 2, the majority of wave 2 retraced between the 50 and the 618 fib level. So in other words, that would be somewhere in here. Probability would tell us that that price would retrace to somewhere between the 50 and the 618, which would be between about 530 and 550, somewhere thereabouts. Now, does that have to happen? No. We can see price broke above this massive ascending resistance line here, which was a very bullish sign. As long as that ascending resistance line holds, that's going to be a bullish indication. If it does break back below that line, that's going to be obviously a very bearish indication of great weakness. Now, it doesn't mean that's going to happen, guys, and it doesn't, even if it does break, it doesn't mean that we're coming back down to the prior lows. It just means that there's a very good possibility that would happen. Now, I told you if price did break down in the last update, that this zone right here, sitting at about 57.60 or $5.60, really at about 5.57, that's where the support would be. Sure enough, price came back down. We saw that was the top of this prior structure, hit perfectly off that zone, almost perfectly, within like a penny, and now we're just kind of sitting there consolidating right on top of that zone. Not even really consolidating, we just found support there temporarily. Now, will it stay there? We're gonna have to wait and see how this moves out, guys. Whether this is the bottom of our C wave and we'd be up for the primary wave 3 next is going to be very telling. We'll have to wait and see if that is in fact the case. And if I pull my fib extension off this, assuming this is the bottom, what are we looking at? Well, wave 3 is often the longest and the strongest, and if that's the case, even if I just do a conservative target, we'd be looking at about $7.24 for a 1-to-1 extension. Now, we know wave 3 oftentimes retraces to a 1.618, which would be somewhere up here at about $8.27. Now, again, guys, that is a very bullish scenario. I'm not saying that's going to happen at all, and in fact, without volume to push this thing through, and we know this is tied to Bitcoin. Unless Bitcoin starts running, EOS is not going to start running at all. Now, if Bitcoin does start running, I do expect EOS to start running at a quicker rate. However, the opposite is also true. If Bitcoin falls, I do believe EOS is going to fall at a greater rate. Now, if it does break below here, where are we looking at support? This 520 to 535 should act, if it does break this descending resistance line, this should act as a fairly solid support, because it has acted in the past as support or resistance, and it should act as a very solid support again. If it does break below 520, we're looking at $5 up here. To the upside, I want to see price get at least back into this 581 to 596 zone. If we can start consolidating again within this zone, that would be a very bullish indication. If price does come back up and it's a very strong rejection on the bottom of this zone at about 580, clearly that's going to be a very bearish indication, guys, and we might see a major breakdown from there. Unfortunately, we're not seeing an increase in volume at all in EOS or anywhere throughout the market at this point. So until we do see volume come in, guys, I know I repeat this, it's like a broken record, but we need new money to enter the market. Without new money entering the market, we cannot have a sustainable bull run. Without new money, this is just people changing, the same people changing hands, the same money changing hands with the same people over and over and over again. And it's typical whales trying to manipulate the market and trying to take people's money. Remember, this is a zero-sum game. For someone to win, someone else has to lose. Never forget that, guys. If we come over here and we look at our moving averages, let me get rid of that. for EOS. There we go. If we look at our moving averages for EOS, this is on the daily chart, guys. We can see that price is broken below this 55-day EMA. It's finding some support on the 8-day EMA, the blue line there, but we can see it broke down by just a wick. It's back above it now. When it broke down, it did find some support. The wick did on the 21-day EMA. I need to see this stay at least above the 21-day EMA, in my opinion, for the bulls to have any shot. If we do break below the 21-day EMA, that's going to be a very, very big sign of possible weakness and a possible much lower prices to come, in my opinion. Switching over to Ethereum, Ethereum was consolidating within a larger wedge as well, or not necessarily a larger wedge, a wedge I should say, reached the apex, broke right down. Again, Ethereum is also somewhat tied to Bitcoin. We can see that this massive ascending resistance line here, Ethereum broke above. We didn't get a nice decisive breakout, which was a very bearish indication. In fact, if I come over here and I look at the daily, you could almost make the argument that it's kind of snaking around and never really decisively broke above this thing at all. It's just kind of snaking around back and forth within this descending resistance line here. So what I need to see is a major break above this descending resistance line, and to do that I need to see price get above $251. If it does end up doing that, guys, I'll start to clearly that's a strong resistance. If it does get above that, I do think if we can get a decisive close above 251, or I shouldn't say a close, a decisive break, and again by decisive I mean if we can get a 4-hour candle that opens and closes above $251, I do think at that point that's going to be a very bullish sign of strength. It will more than likely quickly rise into this order block up here, which begins at right around 275. So between 250 and 275, there's just not a lot of resistance, but we've got to break that 250. In the meantime, we've got to get away from this descending resistance line. If we do break back below this, guys, I think we're going to quickly come back into this zone here between 226 and 220. If price can find some support there, which I think it will certainly initially, and just consolidates, I don't mind that at all. In my opinion, that wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world to break back down, consolidate in this zone, and get ready for the next run. However, if we do break below 220, I think it'll be possibly a very quick fall to at least a bare minimum, at least this zone right here. We can see this order block right here. In fact, that's probably the bad indicator to use. Let me use this order block. Cancel that. This order block right, let me see if I can get this here, guys, sorry about that, right here. I do think that it'll probably quickly fall, if it does break below 220, fall into this order block here, which begins at about 212 to about 206, and below that we're going to come back down into the 196 to 178 demand zone down here. And this will act as a strong support, as it did back here. Now it kind of broke very briefly. In fact, if you come back here and look at the daily chart, guys, you can see that it was a very quick, perfect reversal candle, and then just came right back up. Couldn't ask for a better reversal candle, better technical indicator from an analysis point of view on the bottom of Ethereum there. But right now, guys, we're nowhere near there yet. Right now, we're just watching to see if it can remain above this descending resistance line here, and if it can get above 251, or if it ends up falling back into this 226 to 220, and at that point either consolidating or possibly going lower. If it does go lower, guys, obviously that could signal a great weakness in the market, and a possible coming back down to this, eventually back down to this 196 to 178 zone back down here. And again, a break above 251 will bring us back into this zone. Looking at our indicators, Ethereum is giving us some mixed indications. In fact, if we go here and we look at this point to this point on price up here, we can see clearly it created a lower high. If we come into the RSI here, let me get rid of this little yellow line here so you can see a little better. If we look at the RSI here, it created at the same exact points, created a higher high. If I come over here and I look at my histogram, and again, this is on the daily chart, guys. If I look at my histogram, the histogram in the same points created a higher high as well. So on a downtrend, with this was a overall larger downtrend here, if we were going back and looking at the bigger picture, that is called, that would be considered hidden bearish divergence. Now, clearly, price did end up breaking down. We did kind of have that breakdown, and whether or not we're going to have more of a follow-through with this, or it breaks down further, is anybody's guess, but I find it interesting where we have hidden bearish divergence there. If I pull in here and I look at the 4-hour chart, what do I have on the 4-hour chart? And I look at this price point, sorry guys, we go here. If I look at this price point to this price point on the 4-hour chart, again, zooming in here, looking at a much different view, what do we have from this point to this point? We have a higher low. Now, this being a smaller uptrend, So if I look at the RSI, this again on the 4-hour, RSI created basically a double bottom pattern here. So it considered this was a higher low. We're looking at the bottom. This was an uptrend. We've got hidden bullish divergence here. We've also got hidden bullish divergence at the same point on the histogram. Created a lower low, which in an uptrend, that is hidden bullish divergence when we create a higher low on price. And that suggests that price may have been finding bottom. However, this is on the 4-hour and the prior was on the daily, which suggests that maybe this is, clearly we could see that this was finding an area of support. We don't have an increase in volume to indicate possible bottom. We also don't have any kind of a major spike in price at all, which would indicate possible bottom. So this tells me this might be a temporary delay and more of and there is more downside to come. Does that have to happen? No, absolutely not. This candle is still very early. We did have a little bit of a nice little wick here, which suggests a possible smaller reversal. We didn't have to follow through with the next candle on the 4-hour chart, guys. So again, very interesting. Getting small, we're getting mixed signals on Ethereum, and I really do think it's going to come down to whether or not Bitcoin ends up correcting further or rising further. So anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it there. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please let me know in the comment section below. As always, I would appreciate an upvote, re-steam, or a like if you have enjoyed this content. Until next time, guys, please trade safe. Take care of yourselves. This is Working, signing out.